Here are the props that'll be helpful for this practice. A ball, any kind of ball will do as long as it's not too squishy. This is a lacrosse ball. A TheraBand that you can put a loop into, or if you don't have a TheraBand, you can always use a yoga strap. Any kind of cloth, this is a washcloth, anything that's not too thick, not too big. A bolster, a block, and I have a piece of shoulder stand foam, which is just a skinnier version of a block. Those things would be helpful. If you don't have them, you don't have to have them.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama.
Namaste and welcome. My name's Keith. This is Therapeutic Tuesday, and today we focus on your feet. When you have an injury in your foot or chronic issues with your feet, you know right away that it changes everything about how you get around. It changes how you stand, and when those things are affected, there's a ripple up through your skeleton that starts to cause problems either in your pelvis or in your back or both. So this is a practice to address those things if those are issues that you deal with, or if you just want your feet to feel good after wearing that pair of shoes that you probably shouldn't be wearing anymore. Start by finding a comfortable seat and undo any crossed leg that you have. You can set your feet up in a diamond shape, a little bit like a Baddha Konasana. If you've got any really big rings on, you might take it off. And then just let your feet stagger their position. And then use your opposite hand toward your foot. So you begin to weave your pinky finger into the space between your fourth and fifth toe, ring finger between the third and fourth, and so on, until you get all the way up to the space between your big toe and your second toe. And you're wiggling into that space, and you're trying to get the webbing of your fingers into the webbing of your toes. And as you do that, apply a little bit of a firm grip, a firm handshake. Your thumb can wrap over the top. And then you can do that same thing with your other foot, working in. And this creates space between the digits. So when your toes get crowded, it starts to change the shape of your foot. And instead of you having the widest point of your foot across the toe bed, you instead have the widest point of your foot from the big toe mound across to the baby toe mound, because your big toe has gotten a little bit squished into the center line of your body. So beginning to weave some space back in there. And once you've got it, just apply that grip, and you can use your thumbs, wrap around, pulse, and use your index finger against your big toe on the inside and your thumb against your big toe mound on the outside to move your big toe away from the other four. And it's just a coming and going with it. So it doesn't need to be a constant pressure, but it's a little bit of a pulse, squeeze, and release until you feel like you've really got some new space in between your toes. And then once you do, slowly take your fingers out of there. And as you do, try to keep some of the space that you set up. And then bring the soles of your feet together. And when you start to do that, create that same weaving now with your toes. So if you take the baby toe of one foot in between your fourth and fifth toe, start to weave that together, but leave out your big toe for a moment. And just get the other four woven together and then see if they can stay like that. And then slowly, without your fingers, start to undo the weaving. So see if you can peel them apart. And then change it so the other baby toe is on the bottom. And weave them together. Again, skipping your big toe. And just let them stay together. And notice that you have to use your arches a little bit to keep your toes from breaking apart. And then slowly undo it. And then start it again so that the first baby toe is on the bottom. And this time you will add your big toe to this weaving. And all wrapped up together. And then just like you do with your hands, if you were doing emphatic grip with your hands, see if you can have some of that emphasis on keeping your toes together. And then slowly undo, 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 big toe down. And then one last time with the other baby toe on the bottom. Start to weave everything together. And let your feet hug into each other. Let the webbing mesh create space and create connection. And then slowly undo it, undo it, undo it. Good. And then once you've got that, see if the space can remain and grab your bolster. If you don't have a bolster, you can sit on anything that gets you off the floor, just to prop you up high enough that you don't feel like you have a deep bend in your knees and you can really focus on sitting on your sitting bones. Start by bringing your feet a little bit wider than your hips, so it's not a big stance. And then drop your hands somewhere down on your chair. If you're sitting on a chair, you can tent your fingers on the floor or hold the bolster. And then remember the space that you just created and see if you can spread out across your toes. And then as you do, try to lift your arches up toward your ankles. And then from that, close in ever so slightly toward your midline without picking up your baby toe. And then open that a little bit wider than that starting place and try to keep your big toe down. And then focus on that second opening. So open wider and draw back into that starting place. Open wider, anchor through your big toe, and then come back in. Open wider, notice how your toes might want to grip or roll, and then come back to that starting place. And then continue that, opening up, bringing it back. Opening a little bit, so it's not a big change. A few times, anchoring through the mounds. So when I do that, my middle three toes tend to lift up and the big toe and the baby toe will stay down. You may or may not have that experience. A couple more times like that. Good. And then narrow your feet a little bit. So it's just one heel toe in. So now I'm ever so slightly narrower than my hips. Find the spread in your toes again. And then start with the movement that you just had. Open some, so you feel that tug that wants to pull your big toe off the ground. And then narrow in, so you can close in till there's not much space between your knees. And you're making sure that your baby toe stays on the ground. And then come back to a starting place. And then close in, come back. So the first set of those, when you're opening out, your abductors were doing the work. And now your adductors are doing the work, drawing in. And then you couple that with the work that's going on in your arches. So you're asking your arches to stay lifted, because you want some muscle tone in the arches of your feet. Because when there's no tone there and the arches start to sag, it can start to affect your ankle and you start to roll in a little bit on your ankle, and then that starts to affect up into your medial knee. A few more times, drawing in, and in. Good. And then you can wiggle your toes a couple times and let them relax. Move off your bolster. And then lie down on your back. Set up in a natural, easy shape on your back, just so that you've allowed yourself to drop into your shoulders, your skull, and your pelvis. And then once you're there, begin to pick your feet up. And you can have this 90-degree bend in your knees to start with. And then work at your ankle so that when you breathe in, you can flex your ankle and breathe out and point your ankle. And all the while, I'm not doing anything with my toes. Flex and point. Flex and point. And so now getting out of the actual muscles in my feet as the big sensation, you'll start to feel the muscles around your lower leg. So when I flex my foot, the muscles on the front of my shin really fire, especially around tibialis anterior. And when I work into the point of my ankle, I can feel my calves coming to life. Not as dramatically as the front because there's no weight that I'm bearing, but that's where the action is. Pointing, flexing with the breath in, exhaling to point. So you should start to feel some heat there, warming up the muscles around your legs. A few more times, remembering you're not doing anything with your toes. Last couple. One more time. And then just relax your feet down to the floor for a moment. If you've got a lot of reaction in your lower legs, you can stretch them out onto the floor just to give your legs a break. So then take it into the toe action. Bring your feet up and you can keep the 90-degree bend, or you can extend your legs up to the ceiling. Right? And then focus on opening all of your toes away from each other and then scrunching all of your toes. Open them up and then scrunch them. Open and scrunch. And again, it's the breath in that opens, big flare, and then scrunch. Open, big flare, scrunch. Open and scrunch. And you might notice that I'm not really changing my ankle, so it's not going from a flex to a point. When I scrunch, it appears to be a little bit more of a flex, but I'm not actively pointing or flexing my ankle. I'm just focusing on the action of spreading, scrunching, spreading, and scrunching. A few more times. Spread and scrunch. Spread and scrunch. Last couple. One more time. Opening and scrunch. And then release your legs down. Pause for a moment there. And you might feel some more life on the back side of your leg now from all the opening and the scrunching. Just notice that. Let yourself sink in. And then one more here on your back. When you stretch your legs up, you do need long legs here. It can be done with bent knees, but it's a little harder to sense. Try to keep your legs as neutral as possible. And then when you breathe in, shorten the outside so that the outer ankle gets shorter and the muscles around your outer leg fire. And then do the opposite and shorten inside. Again, your knees are going to want to change, or your feet are going to want to turn out some way. And then shorten the outside, shorten the inside. Shorten the outside, shorten the inside. Finding the muscles on the outside of your leg, resisting, turning, or twisting through your femur at your knees. And so not going turn in, turn out, but really shortening. Just a handful more. Last couple. Last one. Good. And then release your legs down. Pause, pause, pause. Good. And then rock yourself up to sit. Grab a bolster again, have a seat. If you have a TheraBand, you can grab that. It's a fairly small loop. It's shorter than my hand to forearm. It's about half the length of my forearm. And you just want to be able to make sure that there's a strong enough knot. You can make the same kind of loop with a yoga strap. And I'm going to hook this around my big toes. So it goes between the big toe and the second toe. And like earlier, I just want to make sure I'm sitting on my sitting bones. And I can open my feet away from each other just enough that the TheraBand or the strap pulls my big toe into the midline, and then I can practice flaring out the other toes from there. And it's just a static hanging out, right? But in this stretching out, the arches of my feet also lift up into my ankles. Because I'm pressing out and because the strap is pulling in, if I press down into the baby toe mound and try not to scrunch my other toes, I get some lift through my arches, and I start to realign the bone of my big toe right at the mound, right at the joint, especially if it tends to creep in. This is great if you already have a bunion or if you have a bunion that's beginning to form. Holding this space open so that you get the bone back in line with where it's supposed to be is really helpful. And it's nicer in some ways than those toe stretchers that sometimes people wear, because it just focuses on the problem toe rather than trying to stretch out all 5 of them. Just work the ones that are creeping in and let the others flare out on their own, because they will. You could do this pretty much anywhere. You could do this when you're sitting at your desk. You can do this standing as well. You can do this when you are eating dinner. Really, you can do this anywhere that you can have bare feet. Give yourself just a few more breaths of holding this space. Good. One last moment. And then slowly release. You don't want things to snap together. Take that off. Move your TheraBand out of the way. If you're sitting on a bolster, slide that out. And then take your block and just have it close by. Come on up to stand. You're going to work some articulation in your ankle now. So I have to pay attention to where I step. When I take a step with my right foot, I don't want to go so far that it feels like when I drop my left knee down, that my left knee has a hard time lining up with my big toe. So it's just a shallow step. Step, heel toe first, and then I'm moving down to my knees so I get into a big spread in my toes behind. heel of my right foot, ball of my right foot, bend, so I can lower my left knee, and then reverse that. So I go heel, heel, and then my toes. Heel, toe, rock, drop, rise up. I'm rocking back to my back heel, and my front heel comes up last. Rock, ball, knee. And then start to take your gaze forward a bit more. So trust your step so that you really feel vertical through your spine. Taking these shallow steps, and it's a fairly deep knee bend, but if you keep yourself vertical, you're less likely, most of us, to feel as though you're gonna fall forward. Imagine you've got something on your head or someone sitting on your shoulders. You don't want that thing or that person to fall over. Take one more like this. Step with your right foot, rock down, and even if your knee doesn't get all the way to the ground, totally cool. Good, and then pause. Notice where my block is. So when I take a step with my right foot, I'm going to rock, grab the block, and slide it underneath my left knee. So that brings my left sitting bone right on top of my left heel. And I can perch here. I feel the weight primarily on the ball mound of my left foot, not in my toes. So if you feel it in your toes, you can always make whatever you've got underneath your knee a little bit higher up. Sitting on your own heel. Then the challenge becomes not leaning your weight forward. So if there's stuff in your knee, if there's stuff in your hip that gets in the way of this, you can always stay with the rocking and the stepping. But if you're here, be here for a couple more breaths. And then I can press into the block, lean some weight there to come up and replace my step. Move your block, have it ready on the other side. Step, rock, and then I'm going to place the block underneath my shin near the knee. So it's not right underneath my knee, but a little bit back from there. And then I can sit back, sink into the ball mound of my foot. So the weight is really one-sided. I can tap my left foot. That tells me that I'm not dropping a lot of weight over there. I really get the benefit of this asymmetry where I can focus on one leg being heavy, one leg being bent, so that when we bring it into both knees in this shape, it doesn't feel like you haven't prepared. Notice here that your jaw might want to get tight or your teeth might be clenching. And soften your expression. One more moment here. And then put your hand on your block, move yourself up, come back up to stand. And just feel what your 2 feet feel like here. And then you can keep the block there. You can center it out a little bit more. So that when you bring your hands down to the block, go to the ball of your foot on both sides. And then drop your knees. And just finesse where the block is. So that you perch on the ball of your foot and you sit back toward your heels. And that just makes sure that you're not torturing your toes, right? Because in the yin world, this shape is often called broken toe, but no one really wants broken toes. We do want spacious toes. Spacious toes feel great. Something that someone said to me early on in my own yoga practice was that they ended up changing their shoes and needing new shoes because as they practiced more yoga, their toes spread out again. So the shoes that they had been wearing didn't really feel good anymore, and their feet didn't really fit. I wasn't so sure about that, and then it happened to me as well. I'm really just talking here so that you don't want to get out of this. Give yourself 2 more breaths. One more. And then drop your hands down by the block. Rock your weight off the ball of your foot. You can move your block out of the way. And then come down to sit on your heels. But my feet are pointed now, so no more toe spread. Just to reverse what you were doing. So now rather than opening up in more of a dorsiflex, opening up more in the plantar flex space. This might be plenty for you, right? Or you can take your right fingers and tent them down on the floor just as an anchor, and then lean back a little bit, like you're saying, what? Take your left hand onto your left knee and draw your knee up a little bit. So you can really feel the top of your foot pressing into the ground. It's a dramatic pointing of your ankle and a dramatic plantar flexion. So only go as deep in that as makes sense for you. And then release that and go the other way. So you can tent your left fingers, lean back, and then catch your own knee so that you can accentuate some of the lift. Not pulling hard, but I am drawing my knee up away from the floor. Just a little bit more spread across the top of my foot into the front of my ankle. And then release that. And then double it as you drop both hands. So make sure you don't go back too far because you want to be able to press into your fingers, rock back, so that both knees come off the floor. So it should feel like there's length happening, but it shouldn't feel painful. And if it feels painful at any point, make sure that you come down and just don't do it. Give yourself one more breath. And then release. And do it one more time, and then you can use your hands on your knees. But before you do that, you can always bring your bolster in so that it doesn't feel like you have to lean into it, but you can put your knees up on the bolster, keep your toes pointed, and then sit back. It's a different feeling, in some ways more intense, but I'm not having to lean back into it as much. So you decide what feels best for you. Right? For this last time, you can have that same starting place, sitting, rocking back. And then once you've got your knees up, just take your hands toward your knees and lean back some. My hands don't end up doing very much here, but they're also not touching the ground, so they're not helping in that regard anymore. Just 2 more breaths. Good, and then slowly release. Opening up that front side. Good. And then slowly come up to stand. And then after the work of stretching out those 2 sides, stand on your feet and just feel where your weight is. Find your block and set it up so it's across the mat. And make sure you're not standing too close to it. Bring the ball mound of your foot up to the block, and then hook into the very front of your arch so you can get your heel down to the floor. And by getting my heel down to the floor, my weight starts to shift forward some, but I want to then stack my spine over my left heel, over my standing foot there. So I feel where I can place the weight and balance out my stance when there's no block over my heel bone a little bit more so that I'm more vertical and less pitched forward. It starts to open up the sole of your foot a lot. So if you have issues with the fascia in your feet, be very gentle with this. And then slowly shift the weight forward and go to the other side. Hook in. So if you do a little bend of your knees when you're hooking in, you can get into the spot where your foot is really on top, your heel is really in the ground, and then grow out of that. And notice how your weight pitches forward first, and then rock back so you stack right over your standing leg, so the post leg, my right leg. Not locking either knee, not trying to get all the way up into the space behind my knee, but really just feeling like I'm standing. It's a strange way of standing, but there's a benefit to your feet there. Give yourself a couple more moments with that. Notice when your pelvis wants to swing in funny ways. Good, and then soften. And this is where the smaller block can come in. If you have only one block, then go and do this one more time with each foot solo. If you have a lower block, take hold of it now. And the nice thing about the shoulder stand foam is that it's wider. So now I can hook both feet onto the foam, have both heels down. It's not as dramatic an angle with the ankle now. And I can start by letting my weight pitch forward like a ski jumper. And then I can move back and stack more over the heel bone. And I'm watching out for my hips wanting to pooch out behind me to help balance things out. So there's a zipping up, and I can feel my arches lift up to help do that. Again, not locking your knees. You'll feel more prominent around your chest. Notice if you roll to the baby toe mound of your foot more than the big toe, and just balance out the inner and the outer. If you work at a standing desk, this is something that you can do occasionally, just to find that place where you've got more space on the back side of your leg, more space through the sole of your foot. And if I take it back to the point where I feel like I might fall over, then I really get to know my balance in a different kind of way. Play in the space. Last couple of exhales. One more time. Breathe in. And then slowly soften your knees. Step off of your prop. And then you can move those off to the side. If you've got a washcloth or something like it, find that. And it's best to use the wood surface. So just clear a little bit of space if you need it. So you've got some wood floor to work with. Lay the cloth down on the floor in front of one foot. And if you put it into a diamond shape so that you've just got a corner back at your toes, you can work it there. Once you get there, just like what the block was doing a moment ago or what the foam might have been doing, lift up so the ball mound of your foot's not on the floor, and then as you drop onto it, use your big toe and start to scrunch, 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 pulling the cloth back underneath you, underneath your foot as much as possible. And then you can spread that out and switch over to the other foot. So you scrunch, 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 scrunch. and then smooth it out, and go to the other foot. Scrunching it up, and then smoothing it out, going to the other side. Just like when you were on your back, it's a scrunch followed by a flare. Tapping into our cousins, our ancestors, who were much more skilled at using their toes for picking things up. Good. And then from there, if that's the work, you can always keep doing that. Now aim for the center of the cloth. Scrunch it, pick it up, and drop it. And then do that same thing. Scrunch, pick it up, and drop it. Scrunch, pick it up, drop. Scrunch, pick it up, and drop. So you're using the grip strength of your toes, but also because you're picking it up, you're working your balance. And that's when feeling the full spread of your standing foot is really helpful. Once you know where the cloth is, don't look at it anymore. Eyeball it, grab it, look away, pick it up. Curling in. One more time with this last foot. Good. And then you can put your cloth off to the side. If you did anything to your mat, open it up again. And if you have the TheraBand is going to be great for this. When you were using your toes to pick up the cloth, you're gripping, clawing. So the TheraBand will be used to take your big toe in the opposite direction now. So when I set that up, I'm going to hook the TheraBand over my toe so I can curl my toe under, put my heel onto the TheraBand, and then try to stretch my toe again. So it's curled under, and then I have to uncurl it, but it's got this resistance. It's like doing bicep curls for your big toe. Uncurl, and it comes back under. See if you can slow it down going under. Undo it, undo it, undo it, undo it. A few more times like that. Exercise your big toe. Last couple. Good. And then release and go to the other side. Over your big toe. So it really covers the whole nail. Kind of like you've put one of those thimbles on your toe. Curl the toe under, create some tension with the belt or with the TheraBand, and then undo it. And you might notice that one toe is more willing to uncurl than the other, that one struggles more. Last couple of these. One more time. Good. And then release. Toss that aside. Now that you've worked some of those muscles, take it into lifting up. right? So when I stand on my feet, I want to find the spread that I've created in several different places, lay out the spread, balance the weight between my front foot, my rear foot, inside and outside. And then as the weight goes into the ball of my foot, begin to lift my heels without scrunching my toes or rolling in or out and then down again. So that when I lift, first my weight has to go forward and then there's a lift up. Continue like that. So rolling the weight forward and growing by using the muscles on the back side of your leg. So when I said before, when you were lying on your back and you were flexing and pointing, that when you went into your flex, the muscles on the front of your leg were doing the work and the muscles on the back of your leg were for pointing, but we couldn't really feel it when we were lying down. Here's where that comes into play. Move the weight forward, lift your heels. Especially when you're coming down, notice how your heels want to drop into the midline. So keep them moving out from the midline. Notice when you scrunch or when the lift happens really fast. Slow it down so you roll the weight forward and then go up and then back down. 3 more times. Last time. Good. And then settle into your feet. Feel what you feel. Good. And then find your ball and place the ball down on your mat. Stagger your steps so one foot's back and the other foot's forward. Heel on the floor, and then place the ball right in the arches of your feet. And then lean into it and lean back. And lean in and lean back. And then begin to take the ball across as you're leaning some weight forward so that there's this massage happening across the arches, allowing the metatarsals to really articulate under there. So I'm not gripping my toes or flaring them. I'm just letting them move as they need. And the action is directed not at my foot, not from my foot rather, but really how I move my hips. When the ball starts to get away, just bring it closer. So some body weight, and then moving to move the ball. And then to the other side, lean and release a couple times. And then add, as you lean, the rolls. You decide how much pressure you add to this, right? So if you feel like this is intense, don't put as much weight into it. Kind of stand back. And then it is more of a foot movement. When I lean in, I have to direct more from my entire body because I don't have the steering capacity in my foot. Good. And then go back to your first foot. Place the ball under the heel pad now. Lean some weight into that. Typically that's not as sensitive unless you've got problems with your heel bone. So honor what you feel, but work closer into the back side of the arch than you are working on the actual bone. And then you can do just a little bit of a movement through your hips to move across that padding. Because it's bonier there, a little bit of this goes a long way. Good, and then to the other foot. Good. And then move off the ball. And just move your right side to side and feel what your feet feel like. And then you can take the ball away. Come back down to sit. Cross your legs. Notice the difference from when you began. See how that translates up your legs, up your body. Bring your hands together. Take a little bow into yourself. We are one life, we are one light, and we are one love. I bow as always with gratitude to the divine light that we share. Peace be with you. Blessings upon you. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.